Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. I am your host, Ben Pakulski. And when we talk about optimization of health, optimization of body composition, ultimately this aspiration to live long and strong, there's definitely consideration to how we should actually eat. And there's a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of confusion out there. Today's guest, Dr. Joseph Antoun, joins me to talk about fasting, specifically the fasting mimicking diet, sometimes called the Prolon diet, created by a legend in the space named Valter Longo. If you're someone who hasn't considered fasting, or maybe you've thought it's too hard for you or maybe unsustainable, you're going to love this podcast because Dr. Antoun tells us all about this fasting mimicking diet that allows us to eat some food during the day and still maintain all the benefits of fasting over a period of time. He tells us how long we should be doing it, how often we should be doing it, and some specific nuances about what all the research is saying, how we should approach it specifically. This is a really great podcast. So it seems as though, as you guys will hear in the podcast space, sometimes there's a lot of people saying the same stuff. It's a lot of repeated information. Today is not that way. Dr. Antoun gives us a lot of really great, valuable insights. He's an incredibly bright gentleman who did his medical degree many, many years ago, has since gone on to study at Harvard and a number of other places, such as the University of London. And his education is incredibly extensive, nothing short of remarkable. If you want to see and learn about Dr. Antoun, you can check out our show notes. If you also want to access our amazing sponsors for today's episode and support the people that support this podcast, you can head over to muscleintelligence.com/podcast. Check out the list of all of our show sponsors there and access all of our amazing deals that we put in place for you. So thank you very much to today's show sponsor, Vuori, Vuori, my favorite athleisure gym wear that ultimately I wear to yoga, I wear to train, I wear around the house, I wear when I'm going out because it just looks awesome. Quality of the material is amazing. You guys should absolutely check it out and support our amazing sponsors at Vuori. That's VUORI.com/muscle to get hooked up with 20% off your first order. Take advantage of this now. It's an amazing product. You will not regret it. Today's podcast is also brought to you by Organifi. You guys know that for a long time, I've been a fan of greens and reds specifically. I think every man should be taking greens and reds really every day. Women too. Women, I find, tend to like the gold. It tends to be very soothing. It's like a treat after dinner. The greens specifically, guys, if you're not already taking it, you need those micronutrients. You want those phytonutrients. You want to cover your bases. I, for a long time, probably 20 years, have always been taking some semblance of a green product. And Organifi is the one that I'm taking right now. It's an incredibly great tasting product. Oftentimes they taste not very good. Organifi tastes amazing and it works really well. 100% organic. It's also loaded with adaptogens to help you recover adrenally, so you're not stressed or you're not overly stressed recovering from that. And specifically the reds. If you're training, you should be taking some type of reds, which ultimately is a derivative of beets and berries and things like that allow the dilation of the blood vessels. Right? We want to dilate our blood vessels so our penis works, so our muscles work, and we get great pumps. So if you guys aren't already taking Organifi, head over to Organifi.com/muscle and get hooked up with 20% off. Now back to the episode with Dr. Joseph Antoun. Enjoy. Dr. Antoun, welcome to the podcast. Absolutely pleasure to have you here, sir.
Same here, Ben. Look forward to giving your audience something that hopefully will change their life today.
Thank you. And that you're not joking, right? I've looked through your pedigree, the number of podcasts you've been on in the last number of years, and the value you're providing is tremendous. I mean, you come from a very extensive background in the health, wellness, and medical space, and obviously now branching into kind of the e-com world of fitness and wellness. I'd love to hear a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, so thanks for hosting me today. I started as a physician my career. I wanted to help patients. Grew up in a socioeconomic, circumstances that were not ideal. So I always had that passion and compassion to help others. And then went to med school and doing my rotations at Harvard, at Mass General in Boston. I wanted to be a cardiologist and was so excited about that. But then figured out that I'm getting a little bit trained to see people after they're sick, not before then. So I was practicing sick care rather than healthcare. And almost every patient coming out of our clinics was getting 4 or 5 pills that they have to do for the rest of their life. Cholesterol one, the blood pressure one, the blood thinner one, and et cetera, and the blood sugar one. And I remember one day I asked the attending, I was like, if these medicine work, why they have to refill them every month, right? That was my biggest question. It's like, why I'm taking something every month? If it works, I shouldn't continue it. And so then I decided to, and I was always a rebel and a maverick, and I was like, I'm going to change the healthcare system. So let me go and learn health policy and public health. And this is what I did at Harvard and Hopkins, and thinking I'll go and reform the healthcare system to do more prevention, to do more healthcare. And this is what I did. And actually, I enjoyed a career working with 30 ministries of health around the world, or around that number, traveling around the globe and trying to help with system reform, focus on prevention. And you always hit two walls there. Wall number one is, we're telling people eat healthy, whether they do it or not, it's their choice. Everyone knows it, right? It's a set of recommendations. We tell people to exercise, either they do it or not. We tell people to stop smoking. So prevention became kind of a series of advices, but there was no product, there was no market, there was no way to make it easy for people to jump on. And the second challenge is, nobody wants to invest into something that you don't see the results of. So if you avoid somebody getting a disease, if you're a politician, you're not going to get at the expense of a voter having a heart attack and treating them. You want to trade the short term and getting a voter to vote for you because you helped them with their heart attack, versus saving 10 people in 20 years by doing more prevention to them. So I decided to go and learn how we discover healthcare technology and launch them to the world, because I wanted to discover or support a technology that can help people stay healthy long, or prevent diabetes, or prevent cancer, or prevent Alzheimer's. And so first I joined biotech, a biotech company, Lilly, one of the top 10 biggest biotech in the world, learned how we develop drugs, and we launched them globally. And then I left Lilly after being, ended up being head of business development for international, left and started looking for technology that can help into the market. And there's one meeting that changed my life. I was sitting with the CEO of an aging research institution. It's called the Buck Institute for Research on Aging in San Francisco. And he was telling me, you guys, he meant doctors and health policymakers, etc., you guys got it all wrong. And it's all about aging. I was like, what do you mean? He was like, you think Alzheimer's is different than cancer, is different than cardiovascular disease, and you have a specialist for each. They're all the same. I was like, what do you mean? One is in the brain, one is in the heart. And he said, well, if they're independent, why you don't get Alzheimer's at age 22 and a heart attack at age 27, and you only get them at later stage of life. So it's really, your body gets old, and if the first malfunction happens in the brain, that's dementia and Alzheimer's. And if the first event is diabetes, then you have diabetes first, but they all are the expression of aging. And if you drive a car for 200,000 miles and suddenly the window doesn't open, it's not like there's a manufacturing issue with it. It just used it so many times that now it happens the window. In 2 months, it's going to be the engine. And that changed my life, because prevention really is biological aging. And if you can help people age slower and healthier, then you're giving them pure years of healthy life. So imagine you're 45 chronologically, and if I help you stay at 45 or go back to 40, you literally got 5 years of healthy life, because between age 40 and 45, you're not going to get most of the healthcare disease. You're going to get them at 50 and 60 and 70, the cancers, the Alzheimer's, etc. So it kind of it was like the biggest aha moment of my life, where I was like, I should find technologies that slow down the aging process of the body, and that's the best prevention we can bring to humanity.
How do you feel about that statement now? How do you feel about the statement of every disease is a disease of aging? So now that obviously you've spent time looking through it and researching it, is that still your belief?
For sure. And I wouldn't say every disease. I would say the most of the chronic diseases that kill. So 90% of us today will die out of Alzheimer's, cancer, diabetes, and cardiovascular. These 4 diseases are killing 90% of us. And 90% of those diseases, they don't happen at age 20 or 25. You're not going to get your first heart attack at 25. Some people would, but not everyone. Diabetes, you get it later. Cancer, you get it later. Alzheimer's, you get it later. So for sure, they're the expression of. Or let's say aging is the biggest determinant of these diseases. Now you can have genetic predisposition, but even if you have the ApoE gene, you're not going to have Alzheimer's at age 20. You're going to still have it at age 65, and 70, and 80. So it's really aging is the major determinant of whether you're healthy or not on the big chronic diseases.
That's great. So now, sorry, go ahead.
So I said, hey, let me go and meet every aging researcher and try to see who's close to market. And, I can go and help them launch their products or help them with the technology. And I started literally traveling US, Europe, and Asia, all the way to Singapore, and meeting all or most aging researchers. And most of them were pointing at Walter Longo, who's the head of the Longevity Institute at USC, saying look, we're working on a pill that can help aging. It's a long thing because if there's one side effect, then people will not take it every day. So it was a moonshot for most of these labs to find an anti-aging pill. But Professor Walter Longo, who now got nominated by Time among the top 50 most influential people in health, he was working on fasting. And he showed that fasting, it's not like every diet you just lose the weight, but it rejuvenates your cells. So it gets them biologically a little bit younger. And by doing that, you actually are biologically a little bit, slowing down your aging or reversing it potentially in intermittent ways. And the fast, most people think it's intermittent fasting or skipping breakfast. That's not going to stress you enough to rejuvenate the cells. It's actually 2+ days, and closer to 4 or 5 days is the ideal timing. So he actually had discovered a nutrition program that you can eat for 5 days and keep your body in a fasting mode. So suddenly now you have a product, gives you the benefits of fasting, induces rejuvenation, and helps you with the healthy longevity lifestyle. That was a big aha moment for me to go and join him and launch a career into fasting. And I am one of the guys to blame to bring back fasting to the world, actually. And we're so proud of that. And we've we've enjoyed that ride since 2013, and bringing back science of fasting to the world and help people understand how to fast in the right way, what's the value of that for healthy aging and various health conditions.
We'll definitely get into fasting and ultimately how to eat while still fasting and still be considered fasting. That's interesting. But before we do that, I'd love to have you just start breaking down the processes associated with aging. So when we talk about aging itself, what is actually happening in the body? What are the processes that we're concerned with potentially solving for?
So there are 5 major pillars that push you towards aging, or aging faster, accelerate aging, or decelerate aging. One is nutrition, and we're going to talk about cellular level. What does that mean? But nutrition is a big determinant. Exercise, stress, sleep, and it's the 5th one, but probably is the 2nd one by impact, is happiness, is giving and receiving love. It's your social capital. It's that inner peace and serenity, actually. Very, very important. If you study the centenarians, people living 100 and beyond, and we study many of them around the world, that's actually one of the major factors they have. They're closer to their family. They're happy people. A lot of them smoke. A lot of them eat unhealthy fats, and a lot of them, fry some of their food, but they're happy people. And that's very important. So at the cellular level, this all ends up being a biochemical signals to the cell. And there are 3 pathways in a cell that tells the cell, hey, we're spoiled, we have enough either growth signals or nutrition, and let's go and replicate and age. We're fine, we could live la vida loca, versus, hey, we're stressed, we need to go and correct, we need to protect, we need to be cautious. And it's the PKA, it's the RAS, and the TOR pathway. And these pathways are triggered mainly by signals coming from protein intake or from carbs. These are the 2 fuels to the body, or lack of, due to the exercise, due to fasting, due to whatever pattern you follow. So I'm going to simplify it a little bit so we don't get into a lot of detail, because there's a lot of intricacies between the pathways. But proteins would trigger mostly the TOR pathway, and carbs would trigger mostly the PK and the RAS pathway. Think about it this way. This is very important for you and for your audience, because we've been living in this hyper protein area, right? So all of us is like, hey, I want to look great. I want to build muscle. Let me eat protein. Let me go low carb, because the bad is the carb, and diabetes. Proteins are good, and that's big marketing, but that's actually wrong. They both are nutrients that tell you, hey, your fat grow and age. We grow forward. We grow towards our end. We don't grow backwards. Naturally, when you put gas in a car, it's ready to go. When you put nutrients in the body, it's ready to age. It's not ready and to grow. It doesn't take it backwards. This is why fasting takes it backwards. This is why intensive exercise creates stress to take it backwards. So I think one of the biggest, and we talk about changing, your audience life. One of my biggest message today is don't get into hyper protein state every day because you gain tiny little bit of muscle for actually pushing your entire body to age. And that's a big problem. This is why also intermittent fasting and fasting is important for bodybuilders, by the way, and athletes in general, not just bodybuilders, but any active person. We'll talk more about the role of protecting muscle and the role of counter-regulating the pro-aging acceleration from the protein intake. This is critical. And we see it, right? You see it with the extreme. The big bodybuilders, they die early because they've biologically, we go back to biological age, although Ronnie was at 55, maybe biologically he was 70. And Andre the Giant and the big, because they have naturally the acromegaly, they have a naturally internal high level of growth hormone and growth signals to the cells. They actually lose 10 years of life versus the average human being. So it's very important. I always talk about balancing strong and long. You want to be strong, but you want to push the signals of growth, because while you're happy you're seeing your muscle growing, your entire body is having that signal of aging. So it's critical to balance that. And so carbs and protein send signals to the cell of spoilage, grow, replicate, age, versus the lack of is, hey, protect, slow down aging, etc. To answer your question on how the signals end up happening at the cellular level.
That's a great explanation. That's always an interesting balance, because obviously we know that over time, muscle is a thing. Like we want to retain as much muscle as we can over time, because ultimately, metabolically it's more effective.
And muscle becomes an organ of longevity. At later age in life, muscle is an organ of longevity. And if you don't walk, if you don't exercise, if you don't move, you're going to develop, multiple metabolic disease related to that pretty fast. Your metabolic rate slows down, you pick up fat, you pick up insulin resistance and all of that. So this is what we're not saying compromise muscle. No, we're saying balance strong with long. You don't need to overshoot the protein intake every day to just, the marketing in the nutrition industry has biased us to, proteins are great, eat as much as you can, but there's a very fast diminishing return on how much you grow your muscle versus how much you're pushing the aging process in your body. And in the longevity diet book of our founder, Professor Longo, I recommend, people to read that book. It's called The Longevity Diet. It was, I think, 2018 bestseller for Amazon, but he describes a lot that balance and how much to eat in protein every day and he recently published, that's a big paper to read, actually, a meta-analysis of all the papers around protein and IGF. When you eat protein, IGF increase in the body. It's insulin-like growth factor. And you eat carbs, insulin increase. That's a growth factor. So grow. When you grow, you age. Same thing, you eat protein. It's called insulin-like growth factor. It's what gets secreted when you eat it. So this is why you see muscle growing, but everything else is aging. And you want to balance that long and strong. So we published a meta-analysis. Walter published that, Professor Longo, I think a couple of months ago, showing what is the ideal protein intake and IGF level to balance that longevity, living long, while actually protecting the muscle.
Yeah. So would it be, I'm sure you've read the book multiple times. Would it be a balance of just like decreasing daily consumption, or would it be like kind of an ebb and flow where I want to definitely do extended periods of no protein or very low protein, followed by periods of maybe elevated protein? Or is it just like constantly just keeping it somewhat low?
There's no randomized control to compare both scenarios, but you end up, you want to tailor to what your goal is, right? The European school is more of a steady protein and build up, slow. If you want to just, or versus a US school where if you want to do an intensive and burst your muscle, and these are the days when you have high protein, make sure that after that actually you have resting days and you have days where you counterbalance that. But there's no randomized clinical trials comparing what you should do in either case. But what I would say, based on all my scientific background and my readings, is you don't need to go and consume 2 grams of protein per pound per day or per kilo. Like, you don't need to get, unless again you're hitting Mr. Olympia, you're huge, of course, but you don't need, like, I'm seeing all these people drinking the shakes and the eggs, and at the end of the day, it doesn't. You need some of that for your muscle growth, but you don't need to overdo it. And if you overdo it because you're in a phase of hypergrowth of muscle, then make sure you go back and you do the fasting, or you do a low protein zone so that you counterbalance. The problem, if you go on a low protein diet, you might lose again, or a low calorie diet in general, you lose again the muscle. And this is why fasting is key. Fasting is key for fitness because fasting is the only diet that works by stress, like exercise. So let me explain that concept. If you go on a low calorie diet today, say you eat 2,000 calories per day yourself, and you go on 1,400, 1,600. That deficit, the body goes and picks the deficit up from fat, but also from glycogen, a little bit from muscle. Muscle is an easy, organ to pick up some calories from. So people on Mediterranean diet, for example, healthy diet, but they lose muscle with time because the body, due to deficit, picks up the delta from everywhere. And so if your goal is to build muscle, you don't want to go back on any low-calorie diet. This is why they tell you, hey, live on a protein diet and then exercise to maintain that muscle. But if you want to counterbalance, fasting acts not just by a calorie deficit, but by being a stress in itself. So you need 2,000 calories. If you come and you eat 0, what we have seen is the body, to survive, goes back, and it's the stress. You have the stress hormones that are up, and actually growth hormone goes up to protect the muscle. You don't want to compromise the muscle when you're fasting because, again, think about hundreds of thousands of years ago. If there's no food, the body, if you compromise muscle, you're not going to be strong enough to find the next food or hunt the next animal. So what the body learned through human evolution is, if there's no food, you do 2 things. You cut fat into ketones. Why? Because ketones is food to the brain. The brain stays up. You don't lose consciousness, because if you faint, then it would be exterminated as a race. And number 2, you protect your muscle, because this is what keeps you walking to find food. And I strongly recommend people to use that today, because they counterbalance, again, they protect their muscle, counterbalance all the unhealthy diet they've been going through, while protecting their metabolic rate and their metabolism.
Okay, let's talk about what you found to be the most effective fasting protocol, because you've mentioned 4 or 5 days. We know a lot of people out there are doing, time restricted feeding windows. Some people are doing 2 to 3 days. And I'd like to have you just kind of maybe walk us through the benefits of each.
Yeah. So when you talk fasting, there's 2 general types of fasting. There's less than 2 days, we call it intermittent fasting. And then beyond 2 days, anything beyond 2 days, we call it prolonged fasting. And why it's 2 days? Because before 2 days, any type of fasting, and we'll talk about the subtypes with less than 2 days. But if you fast less than 2 days, you have enough reserves in the body, whether it's the liver doing neurogenesis, whether it's glycogen, whether it's fat. You have enough reserve to utilize and go through the 2 days by just burning that reserve. Once you cross day 2, you're getting closer to bankruptcy. And this is where now the body tells the cells, hey, I'm getting rid of my reserves, but you get now, every cell gets to go and eat the debris, the organelle, meaning find calories inside the cells that you can eat and try to repair, try to optimize your performance. This is the process of autophagy, which a lot of us now in the last 6 years have fell in love in and try to bring this miracle of biology back to human life, because it's a way to put your body in check and rejuvenate. We lost that. We eat all the time. Our ancestors did not eat all the time. They migrated, they moved, they stayed, they didn't have refrigerators. So going a day or two without food, it was part of the diet. It was part of living on planet Earth. And the body used that stressful phase to go back and rejuvenate. And to simplify the analogy, if you want, if you're a CEO of a company and you need $2 million per month to operate, if I give you, let's compare intermittent fasting or less than 2 days with the prolonged one. If I tell you, you know what, you need 2 million, or say 3 million, which is 100,000 a day. Well, the first day of the month, the first 2 days of the month, you're not going to get the revenue. You get it on day 3. You'll be like, okay, my bank account will drop by 300K. So that's the fat with intermittent fasting drop. But I'm not going to take drastic action. If you come to me as a CEO and you say, hey, you need 3 million, I'm going to give you 0 for the first 2 weeks. Such a stress on the company. I got to go and restructure the company. I got to go and fix it. I got to cut this budget. I got to cut travel. I may let some people go. They're not doing their job right. So I go back and I start to structurally and functionally improve the performance and the cost effectiveness of the company. That's exactly why fasting becomes so famous in such a period of time, because if you cross 2 days, your body is telling the cells, hey, you got to restructure. You got to go at your best to survive. And this is why aging and fasting became related, because you biologically rejuvenate a cell. It means you're getting a little bit younger. It means you're gaining healthy life, and it's a pro-longevity technology. So below 2 days, it's intermittent fasting. Above 2 days, it's longer fast or prolonged fasting. Under intermittent fasting, you can fast for a few hours. This is what you call the time-restricted eating. Within a day, 12-12. If you just do 12 hours of fasting, you sleep, and then you still have breakfast, but if you sleep at 8 or you eat dinner at 8, you go back, you eat breakfast at 8, it's the 12-12. It's called circadian fasting, following day and night rhythm. Walter Longo, Satch, and Panda are big proponents of this, and it's actually a good way to balance life, and we're almost sure that it's very good for longevity. Some people, because they carry a little bit of weight, or they want to, or for some other metabolic reasons, they go to 16 hours. That's probably the most practiced fasting, 16-8 intermittent fasting. And then some people go all the way to 1 day. They do it twice a week, 5-2 fast. There's 7 days in a week, 5 days you eat normal, twice a week you try to fast. And then the most extreme intermittent fasting is alternate day fast, 1 day on, 1 day off, which is a big yo-yo effect, actually. So we're not sure it's a pro-longevity one, because there's a lot of swinging. But if you want to lose weight super fast, you fast every other day. If you're going to lose the weight fast. So, but we're not sure how healthy that is. Now, although marketing-wise, people tell you you're going to do autophagy with 16 hours or 18 hours, that's not true for most people. There's not enough long enough to deplete the reserves and get into cellular rejuvenation. Now, if you run 10 miles in the morning, you're so skinny and you're fit and you have very high metabolic rate, so you're burning a lot in the morning, then you create enough deficit at the cellular level, some cells will start autophagy. But it's exceptionally rare although again, a lot of marketing is saying you do 16, you get an autophagy. It's rare to get autophagy before 1 or 2 days of fasting.
That's a lot of great info. I'm curious if your thoughts around, you mentioned a few minutes back, like trying to find balance between long and strong. And so that's very subjective, right? So how does someone then decide, how much protein they should be eating? Is it basically just personal preference? Like, hey, this is how I want to look. Because obviously someone may want to be more muscular, someone will be less muscular. But if our exclusive objective is, I want to live long and live well into old age, I want to be able to move well and be strong enough to move.
Yeah.
How do we start objectifying that instead of it being completely subjective?
That's a fantastic question. And we do say that you have different protein needs depending on the cycle of life, right? When you're below age 18 or 19, you're aging and the disease risk is super low, and you're growing even physically and vertically. So you need a high protein intake, that's for sure. The more you get closer to your mid-adult years, and especially that 40 to 60 or 35 to 60, this is the pre-disease. This is a very important age. So up to 18, you need high protein. 18, 20 to 30, 35. Again, you're still young, you're still vibrant, you want to build muscle. It's fine to have a high level of protein. It gets tricky when you get into that pre-cancerous, pre-heart attack age of 50 to 60. And this is where you want to be careful. So train your muscle, keep the exercise, but don't increase a lot the intake of carbs and protein, because this is where cancer starts. And just let's take cancer example, because cancer, a lot of the articles are showing is boosted by the protein intake. When you eat protein, IGF increase is stimulus to cells to replicate. Hey, we're happy. We have a great signal of food. Let's replicate. Let's grow. And a cell is replicating, does a mistake, and doesn't stop replicating, keeps going. And that's cancer. Cancer is a cell that keeps going, replicating with no inhibition. So when you're 40 to 65, your cells are young enough to replicate, to respond to, versus this is why you don't get most of the cancer at age 90, because at age 90, the cells don't replicate. So they're not gonna do that mistake and become cancerous. So the cells respond to food signal. They will respond to protein and replicate. So the signal of replication is there, but they're 40 years old and 60 years old. So they're prone to mistakes. This is why that's the peak age for a lot of breast cancer happens during that age. A lot of other cancers happen towards that 50 to 60, 65, where the cells are responding to food, but they're old enough to do a mistake and becomes cancer. In that age, you want to preserve muscle, but you don't work to grow and over protein. So when you go above 65, your absorption rates are lower. Muscle is an organ of longevity. Your cells are not responding fast to protein because they're too old to replicate. This is where you go back and you increase the protein intake to protect the muscle. So again, a lot more science is needed there, but today's thinking and today's early science is showing that this is the life cycle of protein you want to follow within your lifespan.
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you. I've never heard anybody explain it like that. And that's very, very useful. I think a lot of people will take a lot of value from that. So when we started the podcast, you said there's value or there's an opportunity potentially to fast without fasting, this so-called fasting mimicking diet. And I'd love to have you break down what that looks like and ultimately not just like how we do it, but what's actually happening in the body that allows us to eat and not actually come out of the fasted or still get the benefits of the fasted state.
Yeah. So we said intermittent fasting is less than 2 days. A lot of people do it for weight, for metabolic reasons. Now, if you want to go beyond the 2 days and go into autophagy, into rejuvenation, you're thinking more about longevity. You're thinking about a deeper effects on the cells. The problem is, who's going to fast on water for 3, 4, 5 days? Too difficult to comply with. And you get benefits, but it's risky as well, right? If you eat nothing, you need the micronutrients, you need macronutrients. So the National Institute of Health, which is the biggest funder of research in the US, when they saw the work of Walter Longo on pure water fasting in animals, especially in mice, where he studied, what 3 days of fasting does and 4 days, etc. It was amazing on so many levels. And it was a big longevity lifestyle or pro-healthy aging intervention. They actually sponsored him, and they sponsored USC, the university where he works at, and they sponsored L-Nutra, our company, to develop the fasting mimicking diet. Can you help a person to eat during 5 days, but keep the signals of fasting at the cellular level? So how is that possible, that oxymoron of fasting mimicking diet? So let's go back to this analogy. We talk about a company that needs $3 million right per day. Now, if you give $0, that's pure water fast. It's fasting by starvation. The CEO will go and fix the company and restructure. Now, if you come and you tell the CEO, look, I'm going to give you $1 million out of 3. And by the way, that $1 million is going to go half of it to HR because we want you to protect your employees and pay their salaries. The other half goes to supply because you want to survive next month and you want to sell your goods, etc. So you can see how you help that company to survive. At the same time, there's a deficit of 2 million. So that CEO is not going to say, well, I have $1 million out of 3. I'm happy. I'm not going to go and restructure. It's going to still restructure. So the fasting mimicking diet, the secret is we studied 77 ingredients, macro and micronutrients that will nourish your body. But when they get to the cell, they actually are barely triggering the PKA, the RAS, and the TOR pathway. So the cell feels like I ate a little bit, but it's not enough. I'm still going to protect myself and rejuvenate. So that's at the cellular level. At the blood level, the formulation does not spike insulin. So the recognition of growth is not there, does not spike insulin-like growth factor. So the entire body is not feeling the spikes in growth hormone that actually are secreted when you eat high protein or high carbs. And the cells are barely getting the nutrients in the sense that their radars are not very satisfied and they stay in a fasting mode. And that was the birth of the fasting mimicking diet some 12 years ago. And now we've launched, 6 years ago, we've launched Prolon. A lot of people would know Prolon. It's a 5-day fasting mimicking diet. You order it, you get a box, and you have your structured meal plan. Every day you eat it and you go through a 5-day of nutrition, but your body thinks you're fasting and you get the benefit.
Amazing. So what are the 77 things you studied? I know that's a lot, but what are the main ones? You said you studied 77 macro.
Yeah. So healthy fats, what are the healthy fats that you can eat? The plant-based proteins, a lot of secrets on the formulation, which amino acid sequence triggers IGF, which amino acid sequence does not trigger IGF. What kind of complex carbs, what time of the day you eat those. In the morning you have high cortisol in the body, you have high insulin in the body. In the later part of the day, you don't have that. How food gets absorbed, so that you use that in slowing the speed and the absorption of food, so that you get it slowly into. So it's basically all the macronutrients and a lot of the minerals and the micros that you need to be nourished. The fasting mimicking diet is not a starvation diet; it's a full nourishment diet, but keeps you and gets the signal lower on the cells so that the cells stay in the fasting mode.
Right.
A lot of people ask me how many times, right? How to use it, how many times, and because you ask, hey, how to do it for longevity or a longevity lifestyle. I personally do it once every 4 months. So the good news is it's only 5 days, and we don't ask people to do it every month. We actually, 3 times a year, if you're healthy, you're 35, you're perfectly healthy, you don't need to lose weight, you don't have a lot of high risk factors or family risk factors, then you do it 3 times a year, just 15 days out of the year. It's exactly like a race, car race, right? So intermittent. So if you're racing, if you're doing a car race, and let's say this is your life, you start as you're born, is your birthday, and then the arrival is the day you die. This is the race you want to come last at, right? So how you come last is if you slow down, that's intermittent fasting. But if you really, really want to stay long, you take a pit stop. You go to a pit stop, people come, change the wheels, change the oil. This is the fasting mimicking diet. Every cell is trying to kind of fix under the stress, and then you go back on track. You can stay longer, you can go faster. So it's exactly that. And you take 2 pit stops in the race, max 3. So you do 3 times the Prolon or the fasting mimicking diet. If you have some weight to shed, if you have some metabolic goal you want to achieve, then you do it 4 times or 5 times. But it's 3 to 4 times to give you the answer.
Okay. And then the rest of the year, you're eating what?
So the rest of the year depends on your goal. If your goal is a longevity goal, we have studied centenarians, people living 100 and beyond, and they're pescatarian, flexitarian. So plant-based diet plus fish as the main source of protein, and then a little bit of meat. Again, we're talking longevity, we're not talking building muscle here. So most centenarians are actually pescatarian / flexitarian. And you hear hundreds of theories about what we should eat to live long. And it goes back to getting the body into a peak harmony. And if you think about it, we spend hundreds of thousands of years on this planet as a human race. And people tell you, oh, we lived in caves and you should eat the cavemen. We never lived. I mean, we slept in caves to not be preyed by an animal, but there's no food in a cave. We lived around rivers. Rivers had only the water that we can drink. Oceans, you cannot drink water from ocean. If you're living up in the mountains, there's no water, there's no green, there's no food. So we lived around rivers. It was easy to access the water, and around rivers is you have greenery, you have trees, you have fruits, and all of that. And animals come closer so you can hunt them. And fish was the only animal that cannot fly or run or see. It was easy to fish. So plant-based, fish mainly, and then when we learned how to hunt, we added meat to our diet. And this is what our body is used to. We evolved to eat like this. Now, if you deviate, if you tell you, oh, you should be keto, It's not a longevity diet. You should be carnivore. It's not a longevity diet. You only should do plant-based. Then you're depleted. It's not a longevity diet. The longevity diet is when you match food with what your body evolved and got tailored for hundreds of thousands of years. And that's pescatarian.
Awesome. So during this 5-day fasting mimicking routine, what are the types of things that someone could eat and stay in this fasted state? It sounds like predominantly some fibers and some fats.
No, the food, the Prolon food gets delivered to you. It's every day you have your food. You cannot eat anything else because then the cells recognize the food and you won't be fasting. So it's a formulation. So you get the food shipped to your house. There's a day one box.
It's real food, right? It's not pills and supplements.
No, it's a fasting bar in the morning. It's soups for lunch and dinner. You have your snacks in between. You have your supplements and you have your drink. So the form factor is bars, soups, crackers, and snacks and supplements and liquid. So you get everything you need. You don't need to lose time on cooking, on preparing other food. You just get everything you need for 5 days.
Cool. So would it be easy to assume that whatever comes in the Prolon box there's no blood sugar spikes at all during that time? There's no mTOR stimulation at all during that time? I'm guessing absence of protein would do that. As far as blood glucose, have you seen relatively zero spikes?
You're asking an excellent question. So we've tested the fasting mimicking diet now in over, I think, 22 clinical trials. You have Stanford, USC, UCLA. Soon we're going to start MD Anderson, and we've done Berlin, Genoa. So it's been tested multiple times for the outcome it does, or mimicking fasting. Now, to answer your question, yes, it doesn't spike insulin, it doesn't spike IGF, but, and there's a little bit of revealing a secret here. At night, actually, we do spike a little bit the carbs, and it's very important to protect the muscle. So if everything stays flat and low, you'll be fasting by starvation, not by nourishment. And what we discovered is that when you're fasting and it's a stressful situation, you have the growth hormone is up and the signals to the muscle are there for protection. And if you deprivate the muscle, then you might lose some of the muscle. So there's one of our secrets is a little bit at night, we'll a little bit give you kind of a complex carb, so it doesn't spike insulin, but is enough for the muscle to actually be strong and stay and protect muscle function. We did publish
that's pretty common in bodybuilding.
Yeah, we did publish last month an article on athletes that did Prolon, showing muscle function protection. I think that's even in the title of the article, muscle function protection with the fasting mimicking diet. People want to Google it and read it.
Yeah, so it's very common in muscle building worlds now, or even body composition worlds now, to consume carbohydrate at night primarily, just for modulating stress and helping to improve quality of sleep.
And we use that to, again, I want people to listening to us today to appreciate this is 23 years of true science on nutrition, and we study like we're and $48 million just in the research and developing this diet. You're going to get one of the most sophisticated nutrition technology with Prolon, and that studied really how to give you the most fasting benefit, but how else also we can protect your body and nourish your body through that experience and get you at your peak.
Yeah. Why isn't ketogenic dieting giving us the same benefit? If we know it's primarily to do with glucose and mTOR, and we exclude those.
Glucose, mTOR is a protein pathway, so that's a mixing. This is why. So let me tell you what's the difference between ketogenic and fasting, or fasting mimicking, and why ketogenic diet doesn't give you a lot of these benefits if you want. So the ketogenic diet, to kind of remind people, is very, very low in carb, very, very low in carb. And it has okay level of protein and is high in fat, right? That's the formulation of a ketogenic diet. Initially, animal fat and animal source of protein, now much healthier, going plant-based protein and going, a little bit less, saturated fat. The issue with it is that the PK and the RAS pathways are not getting stimulated because it's low in carb, but the TOR pathway is getting stimulated with the protein. So basically, it's not it's a shallow fast. You're not dipping into a deep fast with the ketogenic diet. This is why you do it every day. and you get to a couple of points of ketones, but you don't get into deep.
And what if you
ketones.
did low protein?
That's getting closer to fasting. Fasting mimicking diet is exactly that.
So,
but the discrepancy is the carbs. I mean, the ketogenic diet came as a response to carb being the worst thing, right? We're all, carbs are bad. We gain weight, you become diabetic. Let's stay away from carbs. But carb is what the body lives on for hundreds of thousands of years. We've never lived on fat, right? There's no fat you can find in nature except if you eat macadamia all day long or pecans all day long. It has high fat. But so our cells are, with the ketogenic diet, they get that mixed message is we're low on carb, we sense some protein. Even if you go low on protein, the protein in the ketogenic diet is sensible. It's not a deep, And if you go low on protein, low on carb, you do it every day, you're in big depletion. So in order to sustain the ketogenic diet every day, you're taking very low carb, but enough protein for the body to detect that. And this is why you don't get into full autophagy, into full rejuvenation, you get into a shallow fast. Now, if you want to do it right, you would go on a low carb, low protein. There's a secret of which carbs, which protein sequence, and this is what the fasting mimicking diet is. But you do it for 5 days. You don't do it. You don't want to take a company through bankruptcy. You want to put it on a financial stress. The CEO fixes it, and then you feed it again to go back and flourish in the right way.
Awesome. So 5 days, about every quarter, is more than enough to get all the benefits of autophagy.
Yeah, you don't need to rejuvenate all this diminishing margin, and again, this is the authenticity of the science and what we say. I'm not telling people you should do it every month. You should do it once every 3 or 4 months. Same way you do 2 pit stops in a race. Because if you rejuvenate, go back to the example of the company, if this month you don't give the money to the CEO, he fixes the company. Next month, you want to give him money to go in the right direction. You don't want to go back and redeplete him. Now, once he gets spoiled and the company is growing, he rehires fast, he starts traveling again and spending money left and right, you put him back in check.
Yeah, if someone's under a lot of stress and they're metabolically inflexible, maybe they're metabolically challenged, we'll say they're metabolically broken, would they still be a good candidate for fasting?
Yeah, actually, they're a high candidate because you want to induce that flexibility, right? For those folks, water fast is very difficult to embark on right away. It's like, I haven't done exercise for a while, and you want to throw me in an NBA match. I'm gonna feel the pain. So for these people, actually warming up with intermittent fasting or a plant-based diet, and then doing the fasting mimicking diet, which is again is a much more we see 91% completion rate. You don't see that on any diet on the fasting because it's only 5 days and you're doing it with food. So those people actually are eased up into it because there's food part of it. It's not just water fast.
That's great. What are you guys working on now? So we've got the Prolon diet. I know L-Nutra is constantly coming out with new stuff, specifically in this longevity fasting space.
Yeah.
What are you guys working on now?
People are doing the 5-2 or the 1 day fast, and we just launched Reset, which is a 1 day fasting mimicking diet. A lot of folks say, look, I'm doing the 5 days, 2, 3, 4 times a year. What to do in between? How can I embark on fasting every day as well? The ones who want to do it just twice a week, they go to work, they take their small box. It's a 1 day fasting mimicking diet. Everything is microwavable. They take it to work, they eat, they stay in a full day fast. So that's Reset. It's called Prolon Reset. And for the majority who do intermittent fasting, the 16-hour, again, you should do the 16 hours if you want to lose weight or you have a short-term reason. But remember that if you skip 16 hours, your brain is not getting fed for that period. Your heart that needs to pump all the time, regardless is. So I'm more of a 12-12. And if you want to do 16, yes, for obesity, yes, if you have diabetes, etc., or inflammation. But in our case, because we help people to fast with food, we've developed the fast bar. So you can eat the fast bar in the morning. We have a randomized clinical trial showing that it's equal to water fast. So you eat it, your body doesn't even, we show the same exact glucose and the same ketones level, whether you do water fast or whether you eat the fast bar in the morning. But when you eat the fast bar in the morning, at least you're nourishing your essential organs while you're keeping the signals of fast. So your brain is getting nourished, your heart is getting nourished, your kidneys are getting nourished, and it makes the fasting a little bit more compliant and easy to do. This is on the longevity and weight management consumer side of the company. We're doing a lot of trials on actually health conditions to see if the fasting mimicking diet can help you with health conditions. I don't want to mix here talking about Prolon and talking about health conditions because this is a different.
Talk about it again.
We've got to separate those.
You provided so much new information and valuable information to start really plugging a lot of the holes. So I'm really grateful. I would love to have you back on to talk about that side of the business as well sometime.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you for today.
Yeah. Where does the audience find the Prolon diet? Where do they find more from you?
You can follow me on social or look me up. I'm very active on LinkedIn at Joseph Antoun. And if you want to try Prolon, you can go to prolonfast.com. Prolon is Prolon, prolonfast.com or prolonfmd.com. The fast bar is fastbar.com. Prolon Reset is prolonreset.com. Pretty straightforward. You can find the products and try them. I encourage it very much.
Amazing. And we will link to all of that and so much more in our show notes. Dr. Antoun, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Ben. Have a good one.
That is a wrap, ladies and gents. As I told you, an incredible conversation with Dr. Antoun, really, really, really well-educated gentleman who, as I said, taught me a lot that I didn't know, added in a lot of little nuance around fasting. And the thing that I loved about him is he didn't just he's not a one trick pony. He just everyone's got to do the same thing, right? People who actually know what they're talking about are very, very nuanced in their way they approach things. Nobody says, hey, everyone should be doing the same thing. It's like, hey, learn to find the nuance that works for you, or ultimately learn to find the thing that you're actually going to stick to, because that's what will work. And there's no doubt that every one of us should experience and should participate in some fasting. How often? As Dr. Antoun says, it should be about 5 days, 3 to 4 times a year. That's a long time to not eat. But I'll tell you what, you can. And hopefully these fasting mimicking style Prolon diet will help. So if you guys are interested in checking out the Prolon diet, I'm going to hook you guys up in the show notes with a link to there, and as well as a discount offered to us specifically by Dr. Antoun and Dr. Longo. So thank you. Ladies and gents, if you enjoyed the podcast, I would love if you subscribe and leave us a review. You can leave us a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and anywhere else that amazing podcast to listen to. And don't forget to check out our sponsors. So head over to muscleintelligence.com/podcast to get an entire list of the podcast sponsors. And specifically for today's podcast, we want to give a special shout out and thank you to Vuori, the world's best, or at least my favorite athleisure products, incredible high quality t-shirts, hoodies, pants, and other amazing athletic wear that you should be wearing to look your best. Got to look fresh, got to look sharp. VUORI.com/muscle. And also today's podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Organifi. Some of the highest quality greens, reds, and ultimately gold, as well as they've got great protein products and others that you can get hooked up with 20% off store-wide. Head over to ORGANIFI, Organifi.com/muscle. And ladies and gents, thank you for being here. I truly appreciate it. I love what I do. I love to be able to converse with amazing, brilliant humans. And I thank you guys for being here. And I'll tell you, the podcast continues to grow. And with the world the way it is and the number of opportunities that you have to go to other places, I truly appreciate that you have chosen to be here with me and the team at Muscle Intelligence. So from my team at Muscle Intelligence to you, thank you. We appreciate you guys. It's been an absolute fun ride. We're coming up on 10 years of doing the podcast. We actually started in 2013. Most people don't know that. A long time. And it's fun. I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes and slacked a little bit from time to time, but it's been fun. Guys, thank you very much. If you're not already subscribed, we have so much great stuff coming at you as we continue to grow. We can continue to upgrade the podcast, continue to bring you the best guests from around the world. Have an amazing day. Live your greatest life in a body you love.
Thank you so much for tuning into Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pakulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.